I have been on YouTube for a little over 4 years now, and in that time I have made hundreds of videos about what I am doing in the kitchen to feed my family. And of those hundreds of videos, dozens and dozens of them are about budget cooking, making meals on a particular budget, sometimes an entire week of meals, sometimes a day of meals, sometimes dinners, sometimes other kinds of recipes. Some of them utilized specific stores. Some of them had a theme in mind, like utilizing the crock pot or maybe preparing family-friendly or kid-friendly meals. I have gathered quite a few of those videos into a playlist, and that playlist is linked in the description box below of every single one of my videos. But I thought it would be interesting, especially since I have picked up quite a few new subscribers over the past couple of months, to go back through those videos and pick out my absolute favorite budget meals and budget recipes that I have created on this channel in the past few years. These are things that I might have stumbled across or that I might have created as a result of a specific kind of budget video I was making, but they're things that have stayed in our meal or snack rotation because we liked them so much, and I wanted to share them again with you guys in case you need a reminder or in case you're new to my channel since I've made those videos. Tonight for dinner, I am making spicy ramen, and this is a recipe that I have been making a lot lately because not only is it pretty simple with just a handful of ingredients, it also comes together very quickly. So even though I cook this on the stove, I only have to have the stove turned on for about 10 minutes to make this, and everybody in my family loves it. And this is inspired by a recipe I saw on Plain Chicken, and I will be sure to leave that original recipe linked in the description box below. They use thinly sliced pork loin for this, but I have made this using ground turkey. I have made it using ground beef, and tonight I am using ground pork actually. And so you just cook your meat on the stove, and then you add brown sugar, soy sauce, and a little bit of heat with either sriracha or chili garlic sauce according to taste, and let the sauce simmer for a couple minutes, and then you just add cooked ramen. I usually use 3 or 4 bricks of ramen depending on how many people I'm feeding. And I always like to just, serve this with some steamed broccoli or some other kind of steamed vegetables, but really easy meal that is very economical depending on the kind of meat that I'm using. And I keep baking it because everybody loves it. Pasta is a really cheap filling ingredient that can be used to stretch a lot of meals, and I have certainly used it frequently in budget cooking. Like in the video I posted a few months back where I showed you how easy it is to make Alfredo from scratch at home, so you can have fettuccine or chicken fettuccine at home for a fraction of what you would pay at a restaurant. Another favorite pasta recipe that I have created for a budget cooking video is this creamy sausage pasta. I love to use sausage as a budget cooking ingredient because it's seasoned already, and a little bit of it goes a long way if you still want to have some meat in your meal, but you don't want to use a whole lot of it. A few other simple ingredients rounded out that recipe, like tomatoes and heavy cream, and it was so delicious and flavorful. I felt like I was eating a restaurant meal. And since it's summertime, pasta salads have been on the menu a lot, and one of our favorites that I keep making is one that I featured in a week-long budget cooking video that came out in June, and it is an Italian pasta salad that used chickpeas, pasta, cucumbers, a little bit of pepperoni, and then just a really simple dressing made from oil and vinegar and salt and pepper. Plus, I keep making this orzo and cucumber salad with feta and dill. I'll leave that recipe linked in the description box below. And if you wanted to, you could probably sub rice for the orzo in that recipe if you don't want to utilize pasta. It's actually summertime right now whenever I'm making this video, and my Dutch oven that you see back there on my stove in a lot of my videos, it's not been getting a lot of use because I don't tend to make like soups and things like that in the summertime as much. However, I have made so many delicious soup recipes in budget meal videos, and soup is such a fantastic way to save money and make a meal that stretches to feed a lot of people, and it's so versatile. There's so many different ways that you can make soup. Like this taco tortellini soup that I made for a $5 dinner challenge. It has beans, it has cheese, it has tortellini, it has rotel, it has so much flavor, and I actually didn't even have to use any meat in that soup. Another really great soup recipe that doesn't utilize meat is a broccoli cheddar soup. And I have made a version that is a copycat Panera broccoli cheddar that is a huge hit with my family. And when I'm not utilizing meat and spending money on that particular ingredient, I can still use really great dairy that adds a lot of flavor, like cheddar cheese, half and half, or heavy cream. One of my most popular videos included 3 dinners that I created from a whole chicken that I purchased from Aldi and then cooked in the crock pot and used across dinner for 3 nights. In that particular video, I made a really delicious homemade chicken noodle soup, and the secret was to make the broth myself and then take the veggies that I used to make the broth and puree them and put them back into the soup for additional flavor. A really easy budget-friendly soup that my mom used to make all the time. She called it cowboy stew or sooner soup, depending on which of her children were at home during the time, the OU kids or the OSU kids. I've heard this called 7-can soup though, because it utilizes a pound of ground beef or ground turkey and then 7 cans of different vegetables and ingredients, including a can of minestrone soup, which actually helps to flavor and season the soup itself. A really simple soup that utilizes just a handful of ingredients that I almost always have on hand is this cozy pasta parmesan soup, and it is really, really easy. It is very simple, but it can be very filling and really just very comforting, especially on a cold winter day or whenever we're feeling a little bit under the weather. Tonight, I am making my own personal take on a recipe I discovered a while back in a one-pot, actually it may have been a 5-ingredient meals video called Porcupines in a Skillet. It's a beef and rice one-pot meal. I usually make it on the stove. Tonight I'm actually going to use my Instant Pot Aura because it acts as an electric skillet and a rice cooker, so I don't have to turn on my stove and heat up my kitchen. I will leave the original recipe that inspired this linked in the description box below. I'm gonna make quite a few changes and I'm going to scale it up a little bit so that I can have some leftovers for lunches as well. I have my Instant Pot Aura on saute here, and I'm just browning my ground beef, and then I'm also going to press 2 or 3 cloves of fresh garlic in here now that we're getting close to the end of the beef being cooked, and also add 1.5 cups of white rice to brown for just a minute or so with the ground beef and the fat that it has rendered. Now this recipe calls for a packet of onion soup mix, and you certainly can use that if you want. I made something similar using 2 tablespoons of minced dried onion, a tablespoon of beef bouillon powder, half a teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, and paprika. And then you can just add salt and pepper to taste, but there is quite a lot of salt in the beef broth base, so I probably won't be adding too much salt. And now I'm going to add 1 can of diced tomatoes and 3 cups of water, and then I'm going to set this to the rice setting on my Instant Pot Aura and let it cook on the low rice setting until it is done. Now, when I do the math, the cost for the ingredients for this meal, whenever I make it the way that I just made it, is just under $8. It came out to about $7.90 or something like that. You could actually shave another $1 or $2 off if you wanted to use ground turkey or maybe ground pork or ground chicken instead of ground beef, because I usually see a better price on those than ground beef. If you wanted to spend an extra couple of dollars, you could up the convenience factor by going ahead and using the onion soup mix instead of trying to make a spice mix yourself. It is done cooking, and now all that is left to do is to stir in about 1 cup of shredded cheese. And I'm just using cheddar cheese because that is what my family prefers. You could play around with different kinds of cheeses. I actually thought Swiss cheese might be really good with this because of the onion soup mix that it calls for. Other rice meals we have enjoyed included these bean and rice cheesy burritos that I made for an Aldi budget meals video, and I used some pre-seasoned ingredients like chili beans and a Spanish style rice mix in order to kick up the flavor in that recipe. I also made a video last spring where I made teriyaki sauce from scratch and tossed my chicken in that and served it over rice as an inexpensive meal as well. Potatoes are typically a really cheap ingredient that can also be used to stretch a meal. I don't cook with potatoes as much as I would like because my son doesn't care for potatoes, but I have made a few recipes for budget meals that included potatoes that we really enjoyed. One of them them was a fideo con carne y papas, which is basically a fideo recipe with a little bit of ground beef and some potatoes along with other veggies and seasonings to create a delicious one-pot meal. I also made a really fantastic stroganoff style meatballs or Swedish style meatballs over mashed potatoes for a Walmart budget cooking video that I put out last spring. So be sure to check that one out as well. When it is not 100 degrees outside and I'm firing up my oven more often, one of the best ways to make an inexpensive meal is to think of a sheet pan meal, because I can use all different kinds of veggies, maybe different kinds of proteins, and I can even throw starches on there like tortellini or gnocchi in order to create a complete meal. One of my favorites is a sheet pan sausage and gnocchi with just some seasonal vegetables, some fully cooked smoked sausage, and a package of gnocchi. I can toss that in olive oil and some salt and pepper or whatever seasonings I want, or I can use a little bit of pesto if I have a jar of pesto hanging out in my pantry. Throw that into the oven until everything is heated through and I have a really delicious meal. One of my favorite inexpensive snacks that I have made for a video before are something that my dad calls spicy crackers. Some people call them Alabama spicy crackers, and I made a version of these for a video that I put out at Christmas time last year. This recipe is super easy and it doesn't require any cooking. It doesn't require an oven or a stove, so it's also a really great one to utilize in the summer months. It calls for a box of saltine crackers, and then I toss the crackers in a dressing that I make from 1 cup of vegetable oil and 1 packet or 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning and 1 packet or 2 tablespoons of ranch seasoning. You just mix those seasonings together with the oil and then pour it over the crackers in a big 2-gallon Ziploc bag and lay it out on your counter. And every couple of hours, you give the crackers a shake, maybe flip the bag over, and after doing that 2 or 3 times, you just pour the crackers into an airtight container and they're ready to eat. I had actually planned to make that recipe again for this video, and I purchased a box of saltine crackers in one of my recent grocery hauls to do that, but I'm not going to be able to do that because here we are in the pantry and this is what is left of that box of saltine crackers. I couldn't get around to actually making the recipe before my kids found the crackers and wanted to use them for lunches and snacks. So hopefully that gives you an idea, even if I can't recreate it in real time today. And since we're standing in the pantry, I'm actually reminded of another favorite recipe that I discovered during a pantry cooking challenge, but is also really budget friendly. I know that making baked goods and breads from scratch is a way to save money rather than purchasing from the store or buying mixes, but my favorite way to make biscuits is to make 7-Up biscuits, and it's just 4 ingredients. It calls for a biscuit mix like Bisquick or a generic brand of Bisquick, a little bit of sour cream, a stick of butter, and just 1 tiny little can or 1 cup of 7-Up. So the ingredients are really inexpensive and it makes these absolutely delicious butter swim biscuits that can almost stand on their own, if you ask me, as a meal. One of my favorite budget-friendly recipes that feeds a crowd that I've mentioned several times is my Aunt Barb's mostaccioli recipe. I have made this several times whenever I need to feed a dozen or more people, and I actually made an entire video featuring a version of this recipe. I will leave that video linked in the description box below, and I'll also type out the ingredients for my Aunt Barb's version. It's a little bit different probably from a traditional mostaccioli because it has a secret ingredient, so to speak, or not so secret, I guess, because I'm telling you, and it is a can or a brick of prepared chili. It just gives it a little bit of a different flavor, almost kind of like a Cincinnati chili flavor, and this recipe makes a ton. I made this a couple of years ago for dinner one night whenever we were gathering with my husband's family for Thanksgiving, and it fed, I think, 20 people at that time. So be sure to check that out if you're looking for something budget friendly that feeds a crowd. I will leave a whole bunch of links in the description box below to websites and videos that I have mentioned, and I hope this gives you some ideas or some inspiration, especially if you are just starting out budget cooking and you're just not sure where to begin. If you have any other ideas for me, or maybe if you have a meal that I featured here on my channel before that you have made and particularly enjoyed that I didn't mention in this video, feel free to leave me a comment. I always like to hear from you guys, and pick out one of those other videos that I mentioned that's linked in the description box to watch next, and I'll see you there.